Hi, I'm Katie.
I'm Sam.
This is Hope and Ever Since. So today we're going to talk about the second thing that you can do to be an advocate for anything, not just this, but building a support team. So basically, to go back, if you know, because I don't know how many of you are watching these videos or how many are watching the videos in order. So just recap real quick. Is when we first realized that our daughter was having an issue, we had what we thought was going to be a parent teacher conference, which turned into really more like a parent and everyone I
Yeah,
think
like an
school who could
intervention, but
help
not. Yeah,
conference. So our daughter's school helped build the support group to start with, right?
yeah,
Basically. So at that point she was working with the guidance counselor and the IEP specialist and her teacher, obviously. And her principal, really like, she ended up leaving the school that year, but
yeah. At the end of the year,
she was very focused on this because at that point, for those who may remember, there was and there is, a lot of focus on what a lot of people think of as the COVID gap, and weren't sure where she was falling in line with that, or this was something outside of that. At this point, remember, we had a lot of questions, not a lot of answers.
yeah,
Um, so the second thing we did was taking all this information and we went to her. We just scheduled us, just basically not really even like a checkup, but basically just like we need to talk to you. Meeting um, with her pediatrician, who's been her pediatrician since she was a baby, so we have a good relationship with her. And basically just, was talk to her. I don't know, like probably like an hour.
yeah, something like
Like a
that.
good hour, just like basically, her going on about like from her side that she had met like her like she
All
started
the
crawling when she's
guidelines.
supposed
Yeah,
to, and all that stuff, and what we were getting from the school and how she's like, okay, but I'm sitting and having a conversation with her right now, and even though I only see her once a year, she's looking me straight in the eye, she's talking to me, and I'm not seeing what they're saying.
yeah,
So that was where she just really felt that if we went down the path of looking at it as like traditional autism, that it would,
set her back more probably.
yeah, and it's like, no, I don't want to say it's like a waste of time because it is actually sort of autism related, apparently. But if she's on the spectrum, she's probably not really deep on the spectrum, at least at this point. So
Yeah,
it just wasn't really like, like we would just be going down a rabbit hole that wasn't,
doing
really
it.
going
Yeah,
to be effective. So at that point, we were just a little bit more stumped, and our real goal was just basically we want her to feel really comfortable in school, and it's still at that point we really just didn't have a lot of idea of what all of her, like triggers, whatever. We didn't know what was going on because
yeah,
again, at home she's basically almost normal. Like all the, I mean, just like a regular kid, just running around doing stuff, having fun, and all that stuff. So we couldn't see what, so we just have to continuously communicate and build communication with her teacher, with the guidance counselor, with everyone, like what is going on, what is happening, what is upsetting her at this point,
yeah.
so we can sort of all guess like what her triggers are and whatever, basically. Um, so if it's hard to create a support system, that's okay. Sometimes you just have to start from where you're at and gather everyone in.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that I talked to my family, and the reason why was because my mom is actually an educator and has been an educator for like 30 years. And my cousin has worked with special needs kids for like a really long time with musical therapy. And so we had some sort of structures to sort of talk to people about what we think might be
What's
going on.
Yeah.
Now, I think where I made a mistake was I got a little locked up in like I didn't know who to talk to about it, and I didn't really feel comfortable talking to everyone about it because I was just so like there was just questions and I had no answers,
Yeah, we didn't really know what was going on.
and it was like she's having problems, but I don't know what her problems are, and I just and and you're like you're in kindergarten, right, and you're just meeting parents for the first time and stuff. It's not the way you want to start a conversation, like,
Yeah,
hi, what's your my kid has issues, you know.
right.
That's not really. But even like friends that I have had for a while and stuff, like I said, we have friends who have kids that are similar ages. I didn't know how to talk to them about it, because it was just like, at some point you just don't really want to feel like judged as a mom, and you just do. You got judged as a mom a lot. So, I think the mistake I made was I bottled it up a lot for like probably about 6 months, and I just let it get like like mount well and it was a problem, it was a problem, but I almost mountain like it was taking like a hill and making it into like Mount Rushmore or
Yeah,
something for myself, because it's not a molehill, it's not like a little tiny puddle or something, but it's like taking like a nice lake and turning it into like the freaking ocean or something. um so by the time we got to I sort of regret that what sort of pushed me to be more open was that we got to the point where we realized we were going to repeat kindergarten. And then I realized, obviously we're going to have some sort of explanation for that. So, and at that point, they had figured out that she probably had speech, right? Remember the
yeah,
first thing they
yeah. I forget exactly maybe it was like the vowels or something. I forget exactly what
right.
or
So they were
enunciation.
thinking,
Yeah,
like,
she wasn't enunciating. Like she wouldn't say the words completely. Like she does that a little bit now in reading. She'll whisper it because she doesn't really want you to hear what she's saying.
right. So they were thinking at first that she had speech impediments
Yeah,
and so forth. So we had some sort of explanation at that point. And so we were just telling people, that I had still was coming from the point that was just anxiety, and because there's so much change and it was just too much for her. And, but so, at that point I started talking to people and opening up about it and stuff. But again, I guess like nobody I knew has dealt with this, so again, we didn't really get any answers, but it was nice to at least be able to just talk to people. And what I did get though was just everybody just being like, "Oh, well, it's fine. Kids are like whatever," you
yeah,
know. And like a lot of people were like, "Oh, kids don't even. Not all kids even learn phonetic, from phonics, and stuff. That's not the way paths and everybody was just so understanding and whatever that it was just everybody and almost everybody I knew was like, oh, so blah blah. My brother repeated kindergarten or
yeah,
I had to repeat third grade or whatever, so it was like it wasn't that big of a deal, you know.
yeah,
And so that would be my first advice to you is if you're dealing with something like this, just talk to people. Even if you don't get answers, at least you have an understanding and you have support and you have people like, who are gonna just, like migrate, prioritize it for you, and basically just make it less like scary.
yeah. Exactly.
Basically. Um but anyway, so where we are now is she has an occupational therapist, and that's how we know exactly that she does have, you know, that's how we know exactly what she does have and what is actually going on, which is a lot more helpful. And then we just have to, but now the question is, would it be helpful to have an occupational therapist outside of the school? Would it be helpful for her to have more occupational therapy on a personal? So that is where we're going to go down the fun path of that, which I, as a starting point, I'm going to talk to someone I actually know who is an occupational therapist and just, basically, how do patients get to
Right.
you? Like, doctor referrals, how do we migrate all that? And then of course comes the whole fun of, you know, healthcare, but we don't even need to get out of that.
Right.
um. Anyway, anything else you want to say?
No, I mean the thing that was a little frustrating for me is just the steps and processes that we had to go through with the school because we knew something was going on, but they have their things that they have to check off before we got to the point where we're at now.
Oh yeah.
So I don't
So
know if there's any.
basically, it's like it was 1 year.
Yeah, they
Like we
did
started with
monitor and
that. With that in October, it was it was like September, October the first year she's in kindergarten. Then they're like, we know there's there's something definitely going on. It takes 1 year to
yeah,
get her into the IE program from that point. And I'm telling you, I can tell that these people pushed, jumped, cut,
they did
ran
what they
around,
could. Yeah,
did whatever they had to get through all the red tape, whatever bureaucracy that they had to do. That is how long it took, even with
yeah,
people pushing as hard as they can. So if your school does IE program is not ready to push, you're good. Just get ready. You're not. We were lucky. We did not have to push that much. We
yeah,
did not have to get into people's faces at our school. Our school was on it, and you might not have that. And I'm, very sorry, but you might not have that experience. And if you haven't, please feel free to comment. Um, we've been lucky because we had, like I said, I had people in my family who sort of I could turn to for a lot of advice and support. We had people, her school is amazing. We have a really great pediatrician who's I know is going to help hold our hand through this next,
yeah,
we need, if it is helpful for her to have even more occupational therapy, which, the great thing with this is now we can take all the stuff that this occupational therapist at our school is telling, and all the reports that we have, and take that to another professional and say, hey, so does this show that we would, qualify for getting a referral and, whatever the heck, but we're going to deal with a lot of
yeah,
more bureaucracy criteria, but it's going to be fun. Um, but yeah, and so then even from that point, it took another year to get the occupational therapist. So we're talking like 2 years, basically, of that's part of the reason why it took a while to
yeah,
get this out. But that's okay. It is what it is. She's so young.
yeah,
She's got time.
exactly.
And she's not although, I mean, how many of my friends are figuring out they have HDHD or whatever as adults?
Yeah, I mean, and we don't. Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, we have lots of friends who are figuring out that they've had issues their whole lives. No one's
Yeah,
ever figured out. So in a lot of ways it's frustrating, but we also we get that we're very lucky, and she's lucky that we're getting help very quickly, and it's gonna make it is already made drastic results in her life, and it will continue to do so.
yeah,
But anyway, to sum up, being an advocate, be ready to push, create a support system, and work with the support system. And don't be afraid to have a support system.
yeah.
Be open.
People will be more supportive than you might think. They always say that the worst judge is yourself. So
Oh yeah, definitely. And I am really bad at
yeah,
judging myself. Like, really bad at it.
yeah.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.